Hello, everyone. Today we are getting started on topic 17, Poetry of Ming and Qing Dynasty. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest host, Professor Grace Fang of McGill University. Let us listen to her first episode entitled Poetic Theory and Practice in Ming and Qing Dynasties. Let us warmly welcome Professor Fang.
And especially the Qing dynasty, witnessed the unprecedented spread of writing poetry among literate men and women in the history of imperial China. This episode introduces the influential theories of poets such as Yuan Mei's native sensibility, xingling, which promoted naturalness and personal expression over formal learning and ethical concerns, thus encouraging the common practice of poetry among men as well as women. The continued, even increased vitality of the poetic medium in the Qing was an effect of the fervor with which individual women and men took up poetry as a technology of self-representation and as a tool of communication and social exchange. The majority of these writers necessarily have not been part of the received poetic canon. However, for the first time, the voices of individual women were no longer isolated instances, nor could women be ignored as they wrote themselves into history by means of poetry. Although no new prosodic forms were created in this period of extensive participation, the Ming and Qing are distinguished by dynastic developments in literary theory and criticism. Poetic theories ranged from those with formalistic concerns advocating Tang or Song poetic models for emulation, to those emphasizing spontaneous, natural expression in style and emotion. First, I will discuss poems written by leading exponents of particular theories to illustrate some of the major poetic trends in the Ming and Qing. Second, because diversity and pervasiveness of poetry writing went beyond the elitist theoretical discourse on the art of poetry in this period, I will introduce important contexts for reading poetry as a commonplace, everyday practice in the lives of men and women. The first important literary movement to arise in the Ming was the archaist school, represented by the former 7 and latter 7 masters, many of whom were scholar officials in government. Its influence dominated the poetic scene in the 16th century, particularly in the capital, Beijing. The archaist poets advocated emulation of poetic models from the past, specifically the Tang. The best-known leader, Li Mengyang, stated famously that when it came to ideal models, prose must be that of the Qin and Han, and poetry must be that of the High Tang. He sought to imitate the grand, expansive vision, affective intensity, and perceptual qualities embodied in the elusive diction and powerful imagery of Tang verse, particularly those found in the poetry of Du Fu. The following widely anthologized heptasyllabic regulated poem by Li Mengyang exemplifies these characteristics. Entitled Autumn Gaze. The Yellow River winds around the Han frontier walls. Over the river in the autumn wind, a few lines of wild geese. The attackers crossing trenches pursue on wild horses. The general with his bow case and arrow shoots at the heavenly wolf. Yellow dust by the ancient fort confuses the swift chariots. White moonbeam across the void chills the battleground. Up north in Shuofang, there were many bold plans, they say. Only nowadays, where is there a Guofenyang? The northwestern frontier became a popular theme in High Tang poetry, attending the military expansion of the empire. In the Ming archaist valorization of Tang models, the frontier theme was often taken up by both male and female poets as a literary exercise, and in some cases as poetic records of actual expeditions. Li Mengyang's poem is an esteemed emulation of Tang poetics. In the archaist's desire to emulate Tang diction and imagery, the individual voice of the poet is often suppressed, and the less successful efforts resulted in turgid and uninspired formulistic pieces. Towards the end of the 16th century, a strong opposition to archaist practices arose, spearheaded by Yuan Hongdao and his two brothers, that came to be known as the Gong'an School. Yuan Hongdao emphasized individual expression and the use of natural and simple language. He famously pronounced that poetry should only express one's natural sensibility, xingling, and not be restricted by conventional form. The poetic language he adopted tends toward the colloquial and easy, the diction being less formal and allusive. The heptasyllabic poem he sent to a friend exemplifies these characteristics. Composed at random, sent to Master Fang. With a flask, a bamboo hat, and a cape of straw, I'm skilled at playing Wu melodies and Chu songs. The wild crane's clear-headed because his bones are aged. Mandarin ducks gray together because their love is deep. Pendants worn at the waist are antiques 1,000 years old. The topsy-turvy script, written when drunk, are waves 10 yards long. Recently, in making verse, I have become more attentive when it comes to long lines every time I study Dongpo. While Yuan Hongdao's poetic theory proved to be a powerful antidote to the archaist influence, his poetic practice did not merit much commendation by later critics. The early Qing critic Zhu Yizun castigated the worst of Yuan Hongdao's poetry for being vulgar, facetious, and flippant in expressing his unrestrained inclinations and feelings. Although not all above partisanship, poets of the late Ming and early Qing, such as Chen Zilong, Qian Qianyi, and Wu Weiye, were prolific writers who produced poetry that stood on their own merits. Chen Zilong infused his poetry with intensity of emotion more akin to Tang verse. Qian Qianyi wrote extremely erudite and difficult poems, some reminiscent of the dense, allusive late Tang style, and others of the Song style. And Wu Weiye was acclaimed for his long narrative poems, redolent of his nostalgia for and guilt towards the fallen Ming dynasty. Wang Shizhen, of the younger generation, impressed his contemporaries as a talented poet and theorist with a preference for Tang poetry. His poetics turned on the concept of Shen Yun, spirit and resonance, which combines the evocation of intuitive perception with a personal tone and placid imagery, as exemplified in the following heptasyllabic quatrain, the first in a series of 14. Qin Huai, miscellaneous poems. In past years, heartbroken on the mooring boat, dreams encircle pavilions by the Qinhuai River. After 10 days of drizzling rain and wisps of wind, the misty scene of lush spring seems like remnants of autumn. The last poem by a major poet critic is a heptasyllabic quatrain by Yuan Mei, the prolific poet who promoted expressing one's natural sensibility in poetry, who wrote more than 4,400 poems in his long life. Disagreeing with the orthodox critic Shen Deqian, who emphasized the moral didactic function of poetry and Tang poetic models, Yuan Mei advocated naturalness and personal expression in writing poetry above learning and formal and ethical concerns. To him, what one writes should be true to one's feelings and character, one's native sensibility. Thus, recalling Yuan Hongdao of the Gong'an School in the Ming, Yuan Mei also appreciated simple folk songs and natural, unadorned diction. He encouraged women to write and publish their poetry, famously taking on scores of female students to the disapproval of more conservative critics. Yuan Mei's poetry, his vast corpus, can be said to reflect his theory of native sensibility in practice. The result is often an affable charm and urbane humor. Traveling in the Mountains, miscellaneous poem. Rugged and steep for 10 li, for half a li flat. Just as one peak says farewell, another bids me welcome. Green mountains wrap around me like cocoons. I don't believe there could be a pathway ahead. Yuan Mei records in a realistic and personable tenor his experience of traveling through a mountain range. To convey the ever-changing visual field on the mountain trail as the peaks appear and disappear, he likens them to friends who welcome and see him off one after the other. Being situated in the midst of a mountain range, Yuan Mei describes the experience of being enclosed by the surrounding peaks with a simile of a silkworm being wrapped inside a cocoon. So tightly that he declares wittily that he does not believe there is an opening ahead. Yuan Mei's advocacy of individual, spontaneous, and natural expression in poetry widely encouraged among men and women the practice of recording everyday experience. Whether traveling, staying at home, visiting with friends, or conducting any other activity, the mundane and personal, as well as the sublime and precious, all can become subjects of poetry.
Let us thank Professor Fang for such stimulating talk.
I hope you enjoyed the talk. Let's relax and listen to a reading of the poems in Mandarin.
秋望，黄河水绕汉边墙，河上秋风雁几行。客子过壕追野马，将军掏剑射天狼。黄尘古渡迷飞晚，白月横空冷战场。闻道朔方多勇略，只今谁是郭汾阳？偶作赠方子，一平一粒一条蓑。善操无音于楚歌，野鹤神清因古老。鸳鸯头白为情多，腰间配绝千年物，最后颠书10丈波。近日才师 心转细，每将长句学东坡。秦淮杂诗。年来断肠莫凌舟，梦绕秦淮水上楼。10日雨丝风片里，浓春烟景似残秋。山行杂咏。10里崎岖半里平，一峰才送一峰迎。青山似剪将人裹，不信前头有路行。